Well, you're very welcome to Destination Newry's. I suppose another little trip down into deep South Armagh where we have the legendary Shanagee, Una Walsh, beside me here. Una, you're very welcome. And of course, we're going to be talking about the legendary Séamus Moore, who was hanged in Armagh in 1750, who, believe it or not, took part in a very famous rebellion, was a Raparee, was a poet, was a lover, was a man of South Armagh, a Carnally man, a relation, a relation of this lovely lady beside me here. Una, your cousin, Séamus Moore, tell us a little bit about him.
Right, Damien, thank you very much for the introduction. So tonight, this programme is on Séamus Moore MacMurchaidh. Last year we decided, because 2020 was going to be the 300th anniversary of the birth of Séamus Moore, and those of us in the Murphy clan who were entering mature years were very unlikely to see the 300th year anniversary of his death. We decided that we would commemorate the 300th anniversary of his birth. And things were going very well on those preparations until COVID came into the picture. So all of the 3-day event that we had planned came to nothing, and just decided before the year would end that we needed to do something before the year ended on the anniversary of Séamus Moore. I suppose for me, it's a family story. It's also a community story of South Armagh. It's a historical story. And as with all parts of local history, I'm going to tell it in a wider context of what was happening around it, because you can't take history in a piece without telling the complete story. And we're going to tell it through poetry and music and song and drama. Because if you're doing a story that is very much based within the oral history, then the things that commemorate it are the songs and the poems of its time. And in any way, that's the best way to do history, is to join all of it in together. So we're going to open tonight with E MacMurchaidh, and he's in Creggan Graveyard. So if we could just start with that one, Cathal.
E MacMurchaidh, and I'm going to play two versions of the song Séamus Moore MacMurchaidh. The first is a traditional slower, which was very popular locally in the early 1900s. Logan O'Murray collected over 100 versions of this song in the area. The version that I'm going to play was collected by Luke Donnellan, and I got it from Podrickeen Nahuilhan's website, Oriel Arts. The second tune is in slipstream timing, recorded by Albert Fry on his Gael-in album, Trinona Burger Air. This album was a compilation of Ulster songs recorded by Albert Fry between the years 1968 and 79. Born in Belfast, Fry was a frequent visitor to the Donegal Gaeltacht, where he learned many of his songs. I've heard a few Donegal singers singing this version, such as Dominic McGillivray and Diane Nicannon. And many musicians from that region would recognise this second tune as Séamus Moore MacMurchaidh. You might recognise it as well because it was the theme tune from Denrow.
Now, as he said when he was introducing that piece, the first one is the older tune, and the second one is the one that was produced by Albert Frey. And I can remember Glenroe. I'm sure Damien can remember Glenroe on the television. And I can remember the talk in our house at home, the fact that was the theme music of Séamus Mór, and it was being used on RTE in front of a television programme, and you know, that being an extremely nice thing for us in the house. But he was sitting at Séamus Mór's grave in Creggan. So to take it back a step further, so where did the MacMurchaighs come from? The MacMurchaighs had come into South Armagh in the late 1200s, and MacMurchaidh as a clan can take their heritage back to Bern. Munchinna Bern, they were known as, but Munchinna Bern was part of Tyrone. Bern, son of Fergal, and Fergal, one of the High Kings, a brother of Niall Frassac, another High King who was the ancestor of the O'Neills. So the MacMurchaighs and the O'Neills of the same clan of people. But the MacMurchaighs had left Tyrone because of the growing power of the O'Neills and took themselves off to South Armagh, as I said, in the late 1200s, only to be followed in the 1400s by the O'Neills, who once more took over as the leaders in the Fuse part of South Armagh. But that's where the story, I suppose, for the MacMurchaighs begin, and all of those stories are of the oral tradition. But Séamus Mór himself, born in Carnally, and associated very much with a school of poetry in Dunreevy and in Mullaban, where I now live. So a link between two of those. And Dunreevy is not a townland. Dunreevy is a subdivision of the townland of Glasdrummond. But that was his area. When the O'Neills, they were free clansmen. The Murphys were free clansmen under the reign of the O'Neills here in the Fuse area, and particularly from the castle in Glasdrummond. So there were a big number of the MacMurchaidh people. But with the confiscation of the O'Neill land in the Cromwellian confiscation, some of the O'Neills, as I said before in an earlier programme, some of them took to the continent, to Spain. Some of them took a quarter acreage in Bahola in County Mayo, and a few of the remnants of the O'Neills stayed here, and that's an important piece that will form part of the rest of this story as we go on. But some of the people who were clansmen then of the O'Neills took to the hills, and they became what was the next piece of history. They became the Raparee men. And on an earlier programme, I talked about Oliver Plunkett, and we talked about the fact that one of the things that Oliver Plunkett was to do, because Oliver Plunkett is the 1680s, one of the things that he was to do was to rid the area of the Raparees. So he wasn't totally successful in that. But Séamus Mór himself, born in Carnally in 1720, and that holding in Carnally still part of the Murphy story. And the next piece of video we're going to have before I start to explain more about Séamus Mór is Kieran Murphy on the holding in Carnally, and talking about the MacMurchaighs in Carnally. Okay, Cathal, if we can have Kieran.
On the farm where Séamus Mór grew up. The stones in front of me here were not part of the original Mass Rock, nor was the cross behind me. They actually came from Glasdrummond Old Church when it was demolished. But the rock in front is original, and you can see a cross carved out in the rock to denote it was the Mass Rock. In fact, the little field up above us here was always known as a gallery for obvious reasons. There's a high rock back behind us that was known as Carrigan Rowark, or the rock with the view. The it was obviously on top of that hill that the sentries were posted to watch for the coming of the British soldiers when the priest was saying Mass. So it was in these fields and this secluded spot that Séamus Moore would have run about when he was a young lad, maybe even served Mass on this Mass rock. And it was this Mass rock he mentioned in the ballad that he wrote on the nights before he was hanged in Armagh jail. So picture Séamus Moore as he sat in his jailhouse waiting his death as he wrote these words. Grey comes the dawn, and from its misty heights comes light to me, who dawn no more will see. For in a few short hours, when sun rays bright flood o'er Armagh, dark death will come to me. The hangman's noose will tighten round my neck, and Patsy for blood money stretch out his hand. That when spring flowers the woods and dells bedeck, Séamus Murphy passes from the land. This is the end, O God, what bitter end! Might not now I, if free, roam hills, a poet's mantle don, and o'er a rhyme with Padder have a row. In dear Dunravy woods, the bracken fronds, uncoiled from earth their upward growth to make. The primrose pale is freed from winter's bonds, as trees are mirrored in Glasdrumond Lake. In wild Carnally of the patchfield corn, there stands a Mass rock. Would that I'd knelt in humble prayer, that August Lord's Day morn, and for my many sins repentance felt. But instead, I, pig-like, lay and drunken snore, my senses drugged by Patsy's raw poteen. Black Johnson dared lay hands on Séamus Moore, and drag him prisoner from that cursed shebeen. Poor Molly, sullen-browed and wry of soul, your sated spite gives yield to sorrow spare. Poor are your wages in a traitor's role, ease with my pardon the remorse you bear. Desires I'd named to my heart most dear, by Craigan Church I'd sleep death's silent sleep, and through my dreams the singing waters hear, and from the earth the raindrops softly seep. But as I helpless face the mob's wild stare, and hear the long-drawn cry of moaning arise, O Kate MacDonald with the golden hair, if you'd be there with sadness in your eyes. Around our fires, but men long will talk of me. I'll hear my tale retold in mournful rhyme. My pride, my fall, my folly, long sung shall be.
So that was Kieran up on the hill behind the house that on the street that was where Séamus Moore grew up. And as he said, most probably used the Mass rock that he stood at. So I'm going to give you a bit of the actual story of Séamus Moore before we take any more of the videos. So born in 1720 and Raparee, and had gathered around him a group of men who were part of his gang of as outlaws, and they roamed from Omeath in County Louth to Caledon in County Tyrone. So they took a large part of this area, and they robbed what were known as the wealthy planters. And it is said, and of course, I suppose if you're telling the story, you're always going to tell the best of your side. But it is said that some of that money was distributed back to the poor of this area when it had been taken from the planters. So they were constantly on the move and constantly in hiding from John Johnson. So bringing in the other part of the story. John Johnson was head constable of the Fuse. The first barracks that was built from Armagh to safeguard the road back to Dundalk was built at Blackbank, and it was built in 1695 in Claddybeg, in the townland of Claddybeg, which is just on the top of Blackbank on the old road as you're heading to Armagh. And the hope was that when they built that barracks, not only would it safeguard the road, but that a settlement would grow up around it, which would provide even more security, which didn't happen. So the barracks that John Johnson came into was the barracks at Carnally. the townland of Carnally, which is just the Dundalk side of Newton Hamilton, on the old Ballymorna Feda, on the old road of the Fuse. John Johnson had originally come from Scotland. So just as my heritage came from Tyrone, Johnson came into Armagh with a background of coming from Scotland, from Roxburgh, outside Annandale in Scotland. He built his house in Dorsey, which is still there, Roxburgh House. And he was, in 1710, made chief head constable of the Fuse. So he was a Raparee hunter. He had already caught in 1714. He had already put to death Cahilmore in Dundalk with a price on his head. He had beheaded him and hung his head outside Dundalk jail. And when he realised that exactly where Cahilmore was from, at Calmore at Leslie, he removed the head and took it and hung it at Leslie. So he was also a priest hunter. So he was a greatly feared man in the area, and had been come there really because he was a Gaelic speaker. So he had a way of actually knowing more about what would go on than others that may have been head constable, because he had part of the language. But greatly feared. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, save us from Johnson, King of the Fuse. Now, Johnson had broken up a poetry school at Kilcurry that had been run by Peadar O'Durnan. And O'Durnan, very angry at what Johnson had done, Peadar O'Durnan then joined the group of MacMurchaidh clan as a Raparee. So the two big figures as part of that story were Séamus Mór and Peadar O'Durnan. MacMurchaidh, a Jacobite supporter, and family history tells us that at the time of James II and William and the big battle that turned into the Battle of the Boyne, and both armies coming across South Armagh to go to the Battle of the Boyne, James coming across the Ballymorna Feda, and William's forces coming on the Slieve Malucra up at the Gap of the North. But family history gives us the story that the MacMurchaidh clan walked as a clan from Carnally and fought on the battle on the field in Aughrim. That Cormac MacMurchaidh, grandfather of Séamus Mór, died on the field of Aughrim. James was defeated, which wasn't a surprise. James, when he was defeated, went to Dublin. And he said to Lady Tyrconnell, "Madam, your countrymen ran away." And she replied to him, "And you, sir, have won the race." So James ran in front of them. So the Jacobites, the following of the Jacobites was there from the two generations before Séamus Mór. But Séamus Mór and O'Durnan planned a Munster meeting on Slieve Gullion in support of the Jacobite cause. And at that time, we're talking about the young pretender, Bonnie Prince Charlie. A name, I suppose, that has gone down in history, that everybody has heard the story of Bonnie Prince Charlie. But they arranged a meeting on the top of Slieve Gullion in support of the Jacobite cause, and Johnson obviously expected that very few people would attend it, but it was extremely well attended, and it is said that Séamus Mór was a powerful orator and gave a very good speech. Now, Johnson was attacked after that meeting, and MacMurchaidh and O'Durnan reluctantly agreed a truce with Johnson at that stage, because they realised that they weren't in a position at that stage to actually beat him. And that carried for a couple of years. But Séamus Mór and O'Durnan reputedly fond of drink, and they frequented a shebeen on the Flagstaff. And if you're over at the Flagstaff, the people in that area can still show you McDacker's field where the shebeen was. But in that shebeen was the daughter of the innkeeper, Molly McDacker, and Séamus and Molly had what the old people would talk about, a tryst. So they had a bit of a thing going on. And she was very jealous of Séamus Mór, because Séamus Mór, when he robbed people, had the arrogance to tell them to stop and be robbed by the handsomest man in Ireland. So you can see that modesty wasn't part of the story. But she was jealous of Séamus Mór, and she was fed stories by one of McMurphy's own men, Artie Fern, who wanted to get involved with Molly, and to keep her jealousy alive. He fed her stories of other women that Séamus Mór was supposed to be seeing. And in her jealousy, she had used a poem that had been written by Peadar O'Dornan about Johnson, called The Heretic Head Cutter. And she brought it to Johnson and said that Séamus Mór had written it. And they set up a plan as to how they would get McMurphy captured. Her father got in on the act because there was a £50 a head on Séamus Mór. There was £50 for anyone who would hand him up. And £50 in 1750 was a big amount of money. So MacDacker got in on the act to claim the blood money. And Séamus Mór had arrived for the patron of Killeavy and got drunk in the shebeen. And while he was drunk and helpless, MacDacker and Molly led in Johnson's men to arrest him. He was tried first in Dundalk for the stealing of a horse, which was enough to have him hanged. And the Dundalk jury wouldn't convict him. He was brought then to Armagh and tried in Armagh and hanged on St. Patrick's Day in 1750 on the Gallows Hill in Armagh. So briefly, that's the outline of his life, and I suppose of his death, and of the people that were involved in the rest of his story. But I just want to, because so much of this is the oral tradition, and because there is such a wealth in South Armagh, and I mean, I don't think we fully appreciate it. There is such a wealth of the oral tradition having been handed on that isn't in other areas the way it is here. I want you to listen, and the quality of this is not very good, because this next piece was recorded in 1961, so almost 60 years ago, on poor recording systems in comparison to what we have now. But the three men that you hear in this recording are three very important people in their own right. One of them is Michael J. Murphy, the best folklore collector in the whole of Europe. And Francis O'Connell, also a folklore collector, not that very long dead. And one of my prized possessions is a letter from Francis O'Connell talking to me about meeting my grandfather. And the third man is my granda, Jemmy Q. Moore, and he's talking a very short bit about the oral tradition and the story that he heard. Okay, Cathal, if we could have that one, please.
I remember him telling us about the poets and about his own relationship to Séamus Mór. Yes, he was a Murphy, that's true. Jimmy, what a wonderful man. He was known as Big Jimmy, and then earlier he was known as Jimmy Moore. He was a direct descendant of Séamus Mór. Do you know Séamus Mór McMurphy? Well, we heard a lot about him when we were children. You heard about his execution, did you? Yes, we heard about him being hanged in Armagh for the stealing of a horse, and that's what he was charged with from someone about Saskatoon. He couldn't get anything on him. Only that he was hanged for that. That was the tradition around Raparee and Carnally. It was said, freely said, that he was not. The night he was charged with stealing the horse, that he was on his keel in a neighbour's house, not on Raparee. But there was no, that sort of evidence wouldn't be listened to in them days.
Well, isn't there a long story about how he was taken from Armagh?
Oh, was from the 1900 or a bit maybe 1895. A very old man told me he was carried from Armagh to Carnally in railways and waked on the Friday and waked in Carnally, and the funeral went from Carnally to Cleggan of the Sandamore. He was carried to Cleggan graveyard of the Sandamore. Where was the wake held? It was held here in Carnally, across the street from where you started talking to me.
Una, I'm just going to ask you a few questions about Séamus Mór, if you can pick me up.
Okay, go ahead.
Just, obviously the sound is a wee bit hard there to make out, but if you listen really deeply, you can pick it up, and that's absolutely a fantastic piece of history to have. It's just really, really unbelievable to have. I see when I look, I actually can feel the pride you have tracing your history lineage back to Séamus Mór. Now, I did hear a story about Séamus Mór that he went one night from Silver Bridge to Monaghan, outside Monaghan, to look after a landlord and come back again to Silver Bridge. And on the way up to where he was going, there was horses every so many miles, so that he was able to gallop at a full tilt to where he was going and get back to Silver Bridge. And Johnson and his people come back to, I think it was in around where Donnelly's is now. There was a pub or a shebeen in there. And that, they were trying to say, you were the man that done this. And he says, well, sure, how could I be in Monaghan and here at the same time? So that was the sort of the caliber of the man that we're talking about here. And when I seen Kieran there leaning over the mass rack again, I can see the link with the whole lot of you there. I think it's just brilliant that this story's been told, because I've heard lots and lots of stories about him. And in Armagh, when you come out of where you go down to the athletic grounds on the hill just under the bypass, there's a big stone commemorating where Séamus Mór was executed. And he was a very young man. He was only 30 years of age when he was hung. And when you mention Padre O'Donnell, the poet, the legendary poet as well from that area, there's serious amount of history locked in those very short space of years between those two people. And like when we think back to 1750, it seems an awful long time ago, but I suppose in the stretch of history, it's nothing. And it's here. And we have said this, on several shows, that the history in South Armagh is phenomenal. And, the thing is, a lot of people don't know about it. But what you're doing is brilliant, because what we're seeing now is history coming alive with shows like this, and with your knowledge. I think it's fantastic, and it's great to be able to sit in here and listen to the story of Séamus Mór. I know we were hoping to be able to walk back from Armagh to Carnally, where he was taken to be laid to rest. And of course, the story of the graveyard in Creggan, that's another story in itself. And Johnson's there as well as Séamus Mór. But Una, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, well, just on the walking from Armagh, you heard my granda there say that the McMurphys walked him from Armagh home. And Daddy would have said carried completely from Armagh by McMurphy men. The McMurphy clan had gone that morning to Armagh in the hopes that as he walked down, Séamus Mór left, and you'll see it further on in part of the piece that Carla Comrade have done. The jail, the Hole in the Wall pub in Armagh was the old jail, and there was an underground passage running from that up to what was the courthouse. And the courthouse at that time in Market Street was where the library is now in Armagh. So he then walked from that library at Market Street down to the Gallows Hill to be hanged. And it said that he sang the whole way down the street to his hanging. And that his body was cut down and carried by McMurphy men There were too many of the redcoats there that morning, and they weren't able to rescue him, so he was hanged. But cut down and carried by the MacMurchaighs, my dad said, met at each townland boundary by more men who would carry him on. Now, we had planned to redo that walk from Armagh, from the hanging at Gallows Hill to Carnally, but as I say, COVID intervened. But I can tell you that on Saturday, the 25th of April, Séamus Mór was walked home, not by Murphy men this time, but by Murphy women. Myself and 3 of my daughters walked it on Saturday from Armagh to Carnally. So as Blaheen McCann said to me that evening when she texted me, "Hup na ma, up the women." So the women took Séamus Mór home at this time. But part of the story as well from the Jacobite story was that MacMurchaidh had fought at Culloden. He had left South Armagh and went to Scotland. The Jacobite rebellion in 1745 by the Young Pretender, by Bonnie Prince Charlie. And I don't know about the rest of you, but at Balnaclosia School a long number of years ago, I learned the poem. Many's the lad that fought on that day, well the claymore did wield, when the night came, silently lay, dead on Culloden's field. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry, carry the lad that was born to be king, over the sea to sky. So Bonnie Prince Charlie was such an important story. Now, you couldn't believe it. You couldn't actually make it up. Séamus Mór was born in 1720. Bonnie Prince Charlie was born in 1720. Séamus Mór, the MacMurchaidh clan and the O'Neill clan of the same ancestors. The man that came from Spain and was part of the rescue mission along with Flora MacDonald for Bonnie Prince Charlie was a man by the name of Captain Felix O'Neill, one of the O'Neills of the Fews. And Felix O'Neill was born in Cregan in 1720. So we're not only commemorating the 300th anniversary of the birth of Séamus Mór, we're commemorating the 300th anniversary of the birth of Charles Edward Stewart, Bonnie Prince Charlie, and the birth of Captain Felix O'Neill, who went on and finished his life as a Lieutenant General in the Spanish Army. Now, uniquely, that the 3 men were born in 1720. Séamus Mór died in 1750. Bonnie Prince Charlie died in 1768. 1788, and the oldest dying was Felix O'Neill in 1795. But you couldn't imagine that the 3 men could be born in the same year. So I mean, that in itself makes a wonderful story. But the next piece I want to do, because the lines of the poem that Kieran said, according to the tradition that was handed on from Daddy, those are the lines that he actually wrote himself in the jail before he was hanged. And those are the lines that he sang as he walked to his hanging. But then there were other verses added to that by Peadar O'Durnan, and the song that is the lament for Séamus Mór is the mixture of both of those, according to my father. Now, the actual poem itself that Kieran said, of course, written in Irish, because Irish was the language, his first language, and it was translated by Tommy Hollywood, who was a Gaelic scholar here from the townland of Carriff, and by Pete Murphy, a brother of my grandest. So those are the verses that were handed down through the family. But I want to introduce Blaheen McCann, and Blaheen is going to sing the song, and she's going to sing it in the street in Carnally, outside the kibble, or the barn, where Séamus Mór was waked before he went to his
Chak the legel shabigan du amar askil. Marvin bog the hodjleva gol masna dark free. Hemwe shower fee a reward he fuji. Flanda den nirel hilri o usle. Katigen ars 22 do vini do drugu. Nur nareli tu saniya sol majilu fadaluhu. Walla kliu golyen vian korum marecha. August MacMurchaidh na hisha cheran is the Hadorechi orum do wadi am perla Gasanish tashi in art macha scan fale rarecha Tormovana pig patsy gun kori gun jimwesh Tormovana pig molly trayer goyu elima is ohlum gorer mochalek Jimmershi dan kinu Chavandu arin and yaldu an vandu yiles. Blian an la nuvi mwene patun kileva. August blian an la mora bi mwene rasi inun yera. New fagar menard macha mar faguna kita Gazerukdar nasraja Jan harmocha sareja Oh togagi go hard me August fagagi mega hiertra August torgi go Carnally me August fagi me saskjavol Go joki mo waher Sko nyanishi mo hinu Sko joki mo hiti Gom nalishi yasayum Kringian domo horu turanunga jehinya August ompregi go doyul jedoni arishma Beketog ni gonal smra oga marjira Spe me egish job lenishirgol in sa hon rise machincha
Fáilte go cearcail córa
So Blahin, that's Blahin doing the song that is part of the old words of Séamus Mór himself and of Peadar O'Dornan. And that really tells the story, because even with picking up on the Irish, you'll hear her talking about the patron of Killeavy. And what about the other players then that were part of it? Betrayed by Molly McDacker, betrayed by Artie Fearn, one of his own men. And Artie Fearn had gone to Armagh that morning, as well as the group of the McMurphy men. But Artie Fearn didn't make it home. Artie Fearn was killed at Ballymacnabb on his way back from Armagh. Patsy McDacker went later to collect his blood money, his £50 blood money, and to show their intolerance of the informer. The authorities paid his £50 in penny coins, and he carried it on his back in a bag from Armagh City, and only travelled by night for fear of the locals. And within sight of the shebeen at the Flagstaff, the bag of money was too much for him, and he died on the side of the road. So all of that is part of the song that is part of that story. Dunreavy, people still talk about the wood. Dunreavy, as I said, not a townland, but part of the townland of Carnally. But it was a large oak wood. And Francis O'Connell talked in the letter that he wrote to me of my grandfather being able to relate a story that he'd heard as a young boy, that a squirrel could travel from Dunreavy Wood to Ballykeel, to the home of the poet and scribe here in Ballykeel, Art Bennett, without ever touching the ground. So much of the area was wooded. After the O'Neill land was confiscated, that wood was cut down and used by the planters who had come in after had taken their land. And the biggest beneficiary of the O'Neill land, as I've said on another story, another programme, was Thomas Ball. But part of that wood had already been cut down, and after shimming, it was burned by the redcoats. It had grown into a shrub, which still allowed the outlaws to hide in it, and because of that, it was burned by the redcoats in Dundalk. Not a shrub or a wood in it now, but if you go up that part of the country, they'll talk to you about the wood. And that's again back to this tradition of the oral, of the carrying on of the oral tradition. And it's why the story of Séamus Mór and many other stories never actually left. It's still in the psyche of the people. It's still part of what's talked about. So we've gone from the oldest part of the story and bringing it forward. And as I said, it was always an oral story. And the first thing of it becoming a written, any type of a written piece of work, was by the making of a play, the writing of a play, Dunreavy No More, by Malachy Conlon. And Malachy Conlon, again, an important name within South Armagh. Malachy Conlon was a nationalist MP, born in 1913. He died again, a very young man. He died in 1950, but a very important part of the history of South Armagh. And he had written the play on Séamus Murphy. It was produced by the first time in Mullaban, because this was where one of his poetry schools was. It was produced in 1945 for the very first time. And it was reproduced then in 1995. And the next piece the next video we're going to show is two of the main people who were involved in that production in 1995, John Campbell and Liam Hannaway. But just before we go to them, the play was supposed to be scheduled for October of 1995, and I had asked my dad to write a piece for the programme. And he'd written a piece on the history and the story of Séamus Mór, and he died very suddenly before the play was produced. So his piece is in that commemorative booklet that was produced for the play, and it's somehow fitting because he told the story so often. It's somehow fitting that the last piece that my daddy wrote, and he'd written quite a lot of material, but the last piece that Daddy wrote was about his own people, was about Séamus Mór, and that somehow is fitting. But I just want to read you something. The booklet that was produced, John Campbell Senior, was a 12-year-old boy when the play was produced in 1945, and he had written an article in the booklet about that original production. And just listen to the detail that he could write in 1995 of something that had happened when he was a 12-year-old boy, and the difference in the production of a play now and then. So he had written, Jem O'Hanlon was the lights man. He took the reflectors out of Jemmy Rice's old car, put the bulbs in them, wired them up to a car battery. Maggie Rice made a shield with glue and sheets of wet paper, painted it gold, and hung it mid-stage to hide the Aladdin lamp. And that was the lighting. Just imagine. And the sense of what that was like when it happened in 1945, particularly because it had been written by Malachy Carnally. Now, it also led to, if you're coming into Mullaban along what is it now, the Tulla-McCreeve Road, through the townland of Tulla-McCreeve and into the townland of Mullaban, you have a set of houses on your right-hand side that are called Dunreevy Park because of the play Dunreevy No More. Paddy O'Hanlon had kept greyhounds, and 3 of his greyhounds were Dunreevy Lad, Dunreevy Wood, and Dunreevy No More. And they were all winners of races in Dundalk, Dungannon, Belfast, and Dublin. So the story carried that way. But this is a piece by John Campbell and Liam Hanaway, where they talk of Séamus Mór and the drama pieces from it. Okay, Cathal.
For Dunreevy will be Dunreevy no more, without Séamus Mór, my brother. And so the play gets its name, Dunreevy no more, by Malachy Carnally. I can remember it being talked about at home. I'm sure you do. Yeah. Like my father was going to it, and of course, plays in them days in the 1940s was a big event. Was a big event in the year. Oh, absolutely, definitely. Even going to the likes of Dundalk for a play, that was a big night out. But anyway, I can remember in I think 1994, I checked the date. My own father gave me a copy of Dunreevy No More, and as he said himself, he didn't ask me. He told me to get it produced. So, needless to say, who would I go to? Only yourself. Cullen then were like a green shoot. They were just starting at the time, and I know that it was you who contacted Thomas McCann. Yeah, it was an idea I had, John, because you wanted somebody who directed, who would bring a bit of kudos to it. And Thomas, being an artistic director for several times involved in the Abbey, and indeed, I suppose he was involved in that whole pageant when he developed in the 1966, the 50th anniversary of the Easter Rising, Radio and Cash in Dublin. And I knew then, coming from Dundalk, he would have an understanding and appreciation for rural drama, and also too for the story of Séamus Mór McMurphy. So I phoned Thomas, as you do, and had a long conversation on the phone, and of course he put pen to paper and he wrote to me, and I'll read you a piece of the letter. Alain Macara, thank you for your letter and the script. I recall the play well. Your local peers entered the Louth Drama Festival way back in 1945, and I think carried off the award. It was the year that the Dundalk Little Theatre did my own play, Country for Old Men, which was written about the earlier Raparee, Redmond O'Hanlon. And then it goes on to explain it in the programme, where he sort of said that He remembered he just left college in Dundalk when he saw Malik Collins play Carnally Moore on the small stage in the Christian Brothers Hall in Dundalk. I recall a colourful production of great power with great dedication from a fine cast of players and an audience loudly applauding what was at that time a notable achievement by a Raparee. And then, of course, he knew Malachy Collins, he talks about, because he was writing for sport in the Dundalk Examiner, and he was able to walk up to Malachy and congratulate him on his first play.
That's fantastic, and that carried right through then to the 1995 production. Are we going to read a bit from the play?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll take the glasses off if we don't mind. You and your peace with Johnston. Séamus Moore, let me be blind. You led me blind into that. I should have never given you my word. I'm at war with him still in my heart. He of all men under the sun I hate. He of all men would I destroy with my own hands. He of all men.
Sure, so would I, man. So would every Irishman. But what the hell good is that when we haven't enough weapons to even knock the vermin off them? No bother. I must insist on peace with Johnson. Johnson is the flint that would set the fuse of Armagh aflame if he were molested. And he would be glad to be at war. Every fresh campaign means new acres of grabbed lands for him and his friends. And now, this is what I want most of all of you. You have a poem written about him.
I have. It's only a couple of verses that will set the country laughing at him. There's nothing very bitter.
Well, no, Father. I must ask that you, as an old friend, to destroy it. And don't let it get among the people. A poem like that, one poem from you, and Johnson will be out again with his bayonets and his men among the bogs and hills with their swords and bayonets. We don't want that. Not until we're able to defend ourselves.
Here it is, Séamus. But, man, it goes against my heart to destroy it.
And there must be no more, Father. You promise me that.
Oh, I'll promise you. I'll promise you. Séamus Moore, you could make me promise you anything. But we're doing a wrong thing. A wrong thing. We're letting the planters get their grip, and they'll spread like lichen on a rock till all Ireland is green.
Well, here, Father, 2 years. Give me 2 years. Now, it's not very long I'm asking. And at the end of that, if there's not a scheme underway that will please even you, then I swear I'll throw my hand in with you and I'll harry the planters night and day till there's not a man of them left alive. Until the last Irishman hangs a skeleton from the roadside trees.
Well, my hand and my word to that, Séamus. But it'll be a sore 2 years on me, for there are words scorching my brain that are leaping and twisting like the souls in purgatory to get out and get on paper. And they are all curses on John Johnston. Now I'll be going. The pattern of Calavy on Sunday till Séamus. I suppose you'll be there.
I will be there, with God's help.
That's horrible. Like, it's remarkable that Séamus Moore was more worried about a poem than maybe someone throwing a stone or worse, firing a shot at Johnston and Hughes. Like, it's something that maybe is still with us.
Yes, the pen is mightier than the sword.
there is no doubt about that. And that was like very often the Gaelic poets, it was poems of satire that they wrote. But when I was reading the programme of the 1995, it's funny how that tradition carries down. Because a man that maybe I'll not name, but you and I knew him well, was talking about the producer of that 46 production. Father Curry was there, something better than God. He would look at you with disdain and make you feel like the mouse when the cat was around. As Homer, the Greek philosopher's ghost, whispered to the poetic mind of Patrick Kavanagh, God makes their own importance. And when it came to producing a play, Father Curry did just that. No vibrations from his assumed talent abounding about anymore. And sure, that's no harm at all. Hard to believe.
It's hard to believe. And indeed, John, as we talk about it, it's the stories that people told and the oral tradition that's kept stories go back to Seamus McMurray, going on right to the day that the productions were done, both back in the 1940s and indeed in terms of the 1990s.
The strange thing about it is they maintain that the play had such an impact was because the characters on stage were alive in the minds of the people, then and still are.
Absolutely. So people talk about Séamus McMurray on a regular basis, Father O'Donoghue, you have the connection with the football players, you have, all the Raparee, O'Hanlon, Redmond O'Hanlon, Calmore, in terms of Calmore's Rock. Them stories are still very alive in people's minds.
Yeah, it's funny enough, I remember, Carnally herself, and when they were paid the money, they were paid it in a bag of halfpence, they were paid in a bag of coppers. And in my lifetime, when somebody was talking about a telltale or a snitch, they said, oh, we remember, I'd well believe it, he says, we all remember the bag of halfpence. And I had to ask my father, what was the bag of halfpence? The bag of halfpence was going right back to the betrayal of Séamus McMurray. The poem was the instrument of his downfall, but that wasn't the main cause of his downfall.
Oh, no. Sure, the main, as always, John, drinking women are very, very bad, are a bad mix.
Well, I gave you a hand, Séamus.
Put out a hand for me, Shirley. Cards and drinking cards, two of the great curses of mankind. What is this you say is the third article? Well, I don't know about that. But it's a sad day, surely, when a woman of your heart turns against you, and it's nothing but the sour word and the cold look for you. But you couldn't see a woman as a curse when you're looking down into her smiling eyes, and her lips are raised soft and sweet and tender to kiss you. Could you, Artie?
Spades are come.
Spades for death, an ugly card it is.
Another drink before we play this hand, Séamus Moore.
Another drink, surely. So what else is there for me tonight? Oh, it's well for you, Artie Fairn, that can sit there at your age playing cards without a sorrow in the world in you. Here am I alone, unloved and unwanted.
And what better am I? Who the hell wants to have anything to do with me?
But I am worse than you.
And how do you make that out?
Well, no one ever did love you. You never had time for love. You're always a man for war and fighting. I was different. You were like an old crow, sighting out on a thorn bush, and no one paying any heed to your croaking but yourself. I was like a swallow. I had a love once who would have come round the world with me. But where is she now?
Where?
That's what I asked you.
I don't know where she is. Are you going to play this hand?
Well, I'll tell you where she is. She's here in this kitchen, and she doesn't care if I was laying out in a drain and the weasels eating the eyes out of me head.
Oh no, Séamus, weasels, that's awful.
Aye, Artie. Would you believe that now? The weasels. A woman herself is like a weasel. A weasel whistles to its tail, but when a woman has a mind, she can do worse. She can whistle the very heart of your breast, and when she makes it dance a tune to her liking, she turns her back and lets it go to the devil. God should never made women. A bad mistake.
There's no doubt about that.
But not the wives hear that.
I can tell you that. Like Séamus, he was, we remember him as being handsome. We were told he was handsome. He was a great way with the women, in fact. Liam, you did one better than me. You got to play Séamus McMurray, the young romantic lead, directed by Thomas McKenna. What was it?
Well, here, John, it probably was my last romantic lead, and maybe then there was a bit early for it at that point in time. But it was a great. The 1990 production was great fun. It involved 3 or 4 drama groups. You had the Dock Theatre Workshop, you had the Dolman players, you had the Coholland players, you had the St Jude's players, you had the Slade dramatic players, and then you had the great Thomas McGanna from the Abbey Theatre directing the show. And then you'd have his wife come and sit in the back of the hall during the production and give commentary on the show afterwards. It was a great involvement, great community involvement to celebrate one of our great heroes, Séamus McMurchaidh. And then Thomas McGanna to bring into it, he understood the whole melodramatic style of it. He understood the original production. So he actually brought the connection to the 1940s production to the 1990s production.
Isn't that lovely? It really truly is, because there's no doubt about it that a lot of plays have been produced in this area, but that one play, the 1946 right through to the 1990s, was remembered and never forgotten. And that's because of the story that it told. But it came to an end, like all things do come to an end. And that takes us towards the end of the play. Niall carried the news from Armagh City that Séamus Moore had been hanged.
The news, my poor friends, is bad news. They have hanged him.
God have mercy on his soul. Tell us now, how did he die?
Father Dorneen, had you seen that man die, your heart would have filled with pride as mine has. He died like a stag among hounds, a prince among rabble to the very last. I have seen death often, Father. I have seen men of royal blood dying on the battlefields of Europe. I have seen glorious flags of an army clotted with the blood of heroes. But I had to come back to Ireland to see the blaze of glory in the death on the scaffold.
Oh, Séamus Moore, tell us all now.
There's much to tell, Father, and for years it will be told. The story of it will be husbanded while an Irishman lives. He died with a song on his lips, his own making. It was more than a song. It was a battle cry of a hero.
That's remarkable. On the 9th of January, 6th of January 1946, I often heard it told, when Niall came in with the news, the old poet rose slowly from his chair and went over and stopped the clock on the stage. And an old woman sitting near the front was heard to say in a whisper, "May the Lord have mercy on his soul." And that was the only sound in the hall. Liam, you've done it all. There is no doubt about that. But I have one on you, I'm afraid. Because well was Séamus Moore remembered, and well did you play the part. But Una Walsh told me the story. She took her Aunt Rosie, her two aunts, Rosie and Lizzie, to see the play. And they loved the play, but on the way home, Una says, "Rosie, what did you think of Séamus Moore's performance tonight?" And she said, "He did very well, he did. But no, yeah, he's a wee bit balded and wouldn't be near as handsome as Séamus. And wouldn't be near as handsome as Séamus Moore." It's funny how it's remembered, isn't it?
Well, I never met Séamus Moore, so I couldn't make any comment on that.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Desires I'd name to my heart's most dear. By Craigen's church I sleep death's silent sleep, and through my dreams the singing river hear, and feel from earth the raindrops softly seep. In days as yet unsped by womb of time, around her fires men long will talk of me. I'll hear my tale retold in mournful rhyme. My pride, my fall, my folly, long sung shall be. Thanks, Sam.
I remember him telling us about the poets and about his own relation.
from John Campbell and two of the men who were part of the 1995 production. Malachy Conlon not only wrote the play production that went out on Séamus Mór. So that was the first written record that was put down, was the play by Malachy Conlon. But in recent years then, there has been a recognition of Séamus Mór, I suppose, out of that South Armagh area. And that's thanks to very much to a group in Armagh City, Corla Cumra, who have placed a stone in Armagh City at the side of Gallows Hill, where Séamus Mór was hanged. So I'd like to introduce them to tell their part of the story of Séamus Mór. So if we could get that one, Cathal, from Corla Cumra. Maybe Damien wants to say something first.
I was having a wee bit of internet connectivity problems there. But anyway, just a couple of points. Number one, when you talked about Séamus Mór being carried home and Artie Fern being killed at BallymacNab, and then Mary Dack and the father and that, and you know, when you think of that, you sort of think of the I suppose the touts and whatever you want to call them throughout history. They never really live with their money. If you go back to Judas the Iscariot with his 30 bits of silver, you know, it is very true with Séamus Mór. And the two lads sitting reminiscing of the play, you could nearly swear that the two boys were sitting as Séamus Mór and Artie Fern having the little chat about the whole thing back 1750. And I would say to Liam Hanaway and to the Leslie drama people, saying this is the anniversary, or just going past the anniversary, wouldn't it be great if they would do that play once more for the people of South Armagh? And I think it would be a fitting tribute to all the people. I could see it in their eyes there. They were really enjoying it. And I have to say, you know, you don't have to have hair to be good looking.
Yeah, that's true, Damien. That's true. Part of what they said there when they were doing part of the play, when they were recounting part of the play, was the fact that there were card players, and the cards would have been played in the shebeen. And part of the story that carried on was that when Séamus Mór had got drunk and was lying on the settle bed in the shebeen when the Johnson's men came to arrest him, and when they dragged him out, Patsy McDacker was at the door, and he said to McDacker, "I'm sorry to say you had the fingers to my knave." So the fingers always wins in a game of cards. So McDacker had the fingers, and Séamus Mór had only played the knave and was lost. But if we could get that piece first from the Armagh group, Cathal, and then we'll talk more about it.
Ardwaha, Grupa Gilgri, Jonach, the Sim, Sistar, Filiat, Kjol, Coulter Iscrack. Welcome to Cora Ardmacha. We're a voluntary group of Irish speakers of all levels who practice their Irish through history, culture, poetry, and music associated with the language.
Séamus Mór MacMurchaidh, Far Ursel, Taoiseach, Far Croga, on Forest Jesher and Erin, Filla, Lake Naniel, Lomdu Naniel. Big Séamus Murphy, descended from nobility, chief, the most handsome man in Ireland, poet, hero of the Gaels, blackboard of the Gaels.
Perfect. Paul Sawala,
Shot on Frizzing in a row, Séamus Moore, Solokraku.
Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, save us from Johnston, Lord of the Fuse.
Agus Séamus a Worthy na Hishakar Nesta Adora Sheorum Dovodi Angarla Isilish Tashi and Ardmaha is Gunfile Recha.
Ní higgin siad Macanianch, agus ní lóram burla law.
This is the site of the present library in the middle of Armagh on Market Street, where it was the site of the courthouse in 1750. And since Séamus Moore refused to speak English, well, he had no chance of a fair trial, and he was condemned to death. He sang the whole way from here straight to Gallows Hill.
Seo Comoru Blaintool Séamus Moore McMurphy atá le Cearcail Córa Ardmaha. This is our annual commemoration of Séamus Moore McMurphy that we do hold on behalf of Cearcail Córa Ardmaha. Shaw and Skibble, this is the barn where Séamus Moore McMurphy was waked. Agus Shaw Clan McMurphy agus Talu Ata Ake. This is the Murphy land, and this is where Johnson was also buried in Urkillacragan and the McMurphy grave.
Go páirseanta ag glóid leom hain. Fuair mé simnach beag sa scéal McMurphy nuair chula mé blianta hen Albert Frey as per firste a canú an Iron sin. Agus blianta in a dhé sin nuair thosaí mid ar bun an grúpa Cearcail Córa. Then lé mid an leor a scríb Lína Cussin, hart for blian gá bhéile a hat agus an taniam ar an leor sin uarscil a bhí an na Yesher na Gréine. Hánig clíine go hard wacha le leor lánsel agus hitch mid a lig an gra le scéal Séamus Moore McMurphy. Scéal le character Croga agus Broúil ach scéal le gríri fill. Agus drama epicure ar nói. So personally, I got a big interest in the story of Séamus Moore when I first heard Albert Frey way back in 1979 or 80 singing the song in Common Clonard. And years later, around the year of 2008, when we started the Cearcail Córa group, Cliona had come to Armagh to launch our book, Ar Yesher na Gréine. And we all fell in love literally with the story of Séamus Moore McMurphy. A story that was full of bravery, character and pride, but also a story that had a lot of treachery and obviously an epic drama.
Una, just before we finish, if just thinking about the whole Séamus Mór McMurphy saga, it's nearly like the story of Ireland. It's got his heroes, it's got his demons, it's got the women, it's got the drink, it's got the English, it's got the red coats, and it's got rebellion at the heart of it. And you know, when you think of the whole story, and it's here on our doorsteps, and I would safely say, not a lot of people would probably know an awful lot about Séamus Mór, but hopefully after what you have done here this evening, and for those that want to know where the stone is situated, if you're coming into Armagh and you go past the hotel and you take the slip road, go down to the bottom of the slip road and turn right, just under the bridge, that stone is up there on the right hand side. And I would say, if you're ever down there, just stop and have a wee look at it. But Una, again, the way you bring the story to us, it's living history. You have the talent that Séamus Mór had back in those days, and you're still carrying that story. You're carrying the lineage, the linkage from then to now, and it's a privilege to sit here and listen to the story. And I have to say, I'm thoroughly enthused with the whole thing. And you know, you had to get the thing in about the three women walking, and of course, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't we?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't we?
I think it's a wonderful thing, and it's a fair old walk from Armagh to Carnally. You know,
22 miles.
And you walk the great road of the Fuse as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think it's a wonderful story. I think what you have done here this evening, once again, you have educated the people of the area, and I just hope that when people sit down and watch this again and again and again, and really just live the moment, live the life of Séamus Mór. It's a little bit of history that was hidden, but now it has come to the fore. And with your own linkage back to Carnally and the Murphys and that, it has been a privilege just to be here, to be part of this. I'm delighted, and thanks to Cathal as well. I think it's a great story, and I would love to see the play. I would love to see that play done. They done it in the 40s. They done it in the 90s. Why not do it in the 20s?
Well, maybe, but we'll see. No, we're not finished yet because I have just a couple more bits to do. I want to really put on record, though, you know, the Lake of Curla Cumra, the work that they've done in Armagh, the fact that the stone, they chose Séamus Mór. In all of the history that was there, they chose Séamus Mór and put up the stone and have their commemoration every year. So thank you very much as a family to them. So we're bringing it nearer to a modern time, and the next piece is particularly special as well because it's from the Traditional Arts Partnership. And the Traditional Arts Partnership here are tutoring to about 200 young people that are learning Irish music under the directorship of Elaine O'Sullivan. And the work they're doing is immense. They asked me a couple of years ago to be their honorary president. I've never been an honorary anything until that, and I couldn't be any prouder than to be the honorary president of the Traditional Arts Partnership. And they have written new compositions. So this is the premiere showing of this, new compositions to commemorate the 300th anniversary of Séamus Mór. So I'll let them introduce it themselves. So if you could put on the Traditional Arts Partnership, Cathal, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jude Quigg from the Traditional Arts Partnership 15 to 18 group. To commemorate the 300th anniversary of Séamus Mór MacMurchaidh, we're going to play a set of tunes. The first tune is a newly composed march called Culloden's Dream. It has a Scottish feel to it as it refers back to the Battle of Culloden. The second tune is a tune written by Turlough O'Carolan called Planxty Brown. It's the 350th anniversary this year of his death, so we thought it would be great to play one of his compositions. The final tune is a newly composed reel called Reel for MacMurchaidh. The two tunes were composed by myself and E. MacMurchaidh, who is a descendant of Séamus Moore himself. Many thanks to Kenny Qua, a tutor with Tap, who mixed and produced this. We hope you enjoy. Thanks very much.
Una, I have to say, it's a credit to the young people of this area to come out and I suppose for us to hear that for the first time. But you know, I love the enthusiasm of the youth. I love the ability that they have. That they, you know, nothing will stop them from doing what they need to do. And I think you're a very lucky woman to be the president of those people, those young people that give us those wonderful tunes. There, it has been. It's just a credit to them, and it's unreal. It's just unbelievable stuff. It's class. It's just class.
Isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, where could you get a group of young people that could do that? I mean, to have two new pieces of music written that are commemorating Séamus Mór, you know, so that you've taken a story, and this is what I love about history, and you know, you've taken a story that began in the 1200s, you know, and you've carried it through to you now have in 2002 young people composing music in a commemorative way for that. I mean, it really and truly, it's exceptional. And we have to, you know, take it back to the recognition of what this area has. What is in the people, what makes this area so special is its people, you know, and that's absolutely outstanding for those young people. I mean, I absolutely could not be prouder to be involved in TAP. But I want to do just one last piece because Kieran said the poem, the 5 verses of the poem that we know that Séamus Mór wrote himself. And you heard Declan from the Curler group in Armagh say that Séamus wouldn't accept his trial in English. He was an Irish speaker. So I want to play you a piece now that is my 2 nephews, 2 Murphy men. One of them doing Séamus Mór's poem as Gaeilge own language, and the other playing the music that is now part of that Séamus Mór story. So if we could have Jamie and E, Cathal, please, and then I'll come back just to finish off.
Leah ar Majin mar éiríonn an Grian agus úna Hardra Céach ag an solas cuam nach beictí mé Leah choris. Ag an Taman lugs an Grian ag dóitiú a tholas ar adwacha an bás dú a glófií orm féin. Cort an ropa har mo windial go Gian agus síniu Patsy láv amach de hargad na fola. Be blahana an arach ag dathú na tithe ach ní feic for Séamus Mór an muoin éach a réis go Joe. Seo thuam an Jerry agus tíad nach searg mo chréice. Fairer nach bhfuil an tíagam be cosíoch na cnic agus a brat geall an fila orm ag argáil le Patsy faoin na éagse uair. Nach suamh nach dim réimse agus gas na rathnaí ag buint as a luú le sinú chun na spéile. Tá an sebhachan siar ó Graham docht an Gabry agus nach sochar sceall na gran ar Loch Glas Drum. Ag Carnally féin ar an brac góirt na hábhar mar geall carrig an affran ina seasamh go bún. Si an trú nach síos ar mar glúna a thuime an maidin sin na mé lúnasa le padra uhla rá agus aithní a dhéanamh an eile paci. An áit a bheith ag sranú mar a bheith moch gneanc neisce. Watching av Patsy a rinne cran gal Kyle Doom is a hub file the Johnson Kangla car or Séamus Mór. Ma haring chum shabin mal he shinna ma came ganwa a mali bocht scruma and comma a towert og some raja dochri o chassis tu do service a sprunach shin a birch. Nach bocht on touristil ditch e do fortunes and fine. A brief do fila sa wahunas shaw Maita MacMurchaidh and Joey May Doch Maroon. MacMurchaidh gal and Craig and a leafy May and up. The Kyola Hound was soon consumed, was Joe her fine at Kitchen, Irma Ui. Sean Ish Fadge great and Imaginia August May and Fane on Drying Camp Fuck Extanu the Hulk in a Cree. Octua May and Macca a catch Victon, a Gruiga Ordway. We're brown the hinching a Gran Irma Violi. Heart or intention, I'm sure, I'm outgrowing. For Joe, Egmo Wincher, a Glenny Mushkale, on Broad Augustin Titchum, a G Scaly Naji.
Again, young Jamie, he can play a bit of football, but he's not a bad poet. I have to say, well done to the two young Murphys men. Una, I'm going to leave the final part of the jigsaw to wrap the whole circle. So I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I suppose. So I suppose for me, those two lads, Jamie and E, have taken it full circle. Two of the descendants of the MacMurchaighs, using their language and using their music, that the culture is alive and well, and the culture that was there right through those years, and that's important. Just to finish it up, there's an important part of it for me as well, because yes, it's a family story, it's a community story, it's a historical story, and history's best told, I think, in this way of doing it. But also in the present day, I mean, all of those performances tonight, I lifted a phone and I said to somebody, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And it didn't matter what I asked. And I think very much as well, that's part of South Armagh, is that sense of community, and that when you need something, it's done, and it's not only done, but it's done with a heart and a half and a willingness to do anything that they could to support what's happening. And that's a lovely community live in and to be part of. And I also want to thank yourself, Damien, and Cathal and Destination Newry, because I think that's maybe 9 programs that we've done now that are all on video. They're recorded. They're there for people to go back and look and watch. And that's what history should be. It should be accessible and free and informative for anyone that wants that information. So I owe a debt of gratitude to Destination Newry for allowing me to do that. And they're not only recording me, they're recording all over South Armagh and around Newry. So I want to thank yourself, Damien, and Cathal, and to thank anyone that viewed into it and listened to it. It's my story and I love it. And thank you very much.
Una, I thought Cathal was going to cut us there.
Oh, so did I.
Just before we finish, there has been a serious amount of interaction on social media with us here this evening, and it's all due to yourself. And on behalf of Destination Newry, I would like to thank you for being the conduit for this little bit of history that we've done. And, you know, it has been so informative over this last couple of months that we've heard some great stories, we've heard history. And I know we've literally only scratched the surface, and we have said that South Armagh is one of the greatest areas of Ireland to have history. And we know that old Ulster was the last of the great Celtic I suppose provinces to succumb to the English, if you want to call it that. But with what's going on in South Armagh, particularly with yourself and with the young people, you know, and I sort of love reading stories. I love sort of trying to write stories of a little bit of stuff that happened back when I was a child. And I firmly believe people absolutely love listening to it and love reading these stories. Yeah. And I think, you know, maybe that's a little bit of what's in our DNA going back. Now, I know you can trace yourself back to Tyrone. And I'm not sure where we come from. I haven't a clue. I don't know. With a name like ours, we probably come from Scotland somewhere. But I would like to think maybe we come over here with Séamus Moore when he come back from Clonadon. I have no idea.
Come from Clonadon.
I have no idea. But Una, it has been an absolute pleasure as usual, and I think, you know, we have to keep doing this later on in the year. I'm sure there's loads of other stories that you can tell us. I know you did mention to me about the mummers and the story of that. Maybe that's one that we could do something on. I done a little bit of that along with Pat McGinn back in the day, raising money around this time of the year for charities. And I could tell you a great story about going into Cullyhanna, but we'll keep that for maybe a night of the mummers and where it all come from. Una,
and that would be lovely, ahead. The mummers. And yeah, the mummers would be a terrific one, because Michael J put down some of the verses of the mummers, and I have a group of young children interested in it. And, you know, the mumming one would be an absolutely terrific one.
Well, here's a wee secret for you.
I'm handing it to you and McGinn.
The stories that you're talking about there from the legendary man himself, I think those are the ones that Pat McGinn took and gave them to us. And I remember the first night that I done it. It was in the old people's home in Aviva up in Bessbrook, and I was standing there, and I was Slasher, and I was to start the whole thing, and my mind went blank. I couldn't even think of my name. And my daughter was standing looking at me, and I could see her shaking her head like this. And McGinn shouted one word, and that was it. Away I went, and I loved every minute of it. But listen, Séamus Moore, a lovely story, a story of Ireland on our doorsteps. And it's been an absolute privilege for Destination Newry to be able to bring this to people further afield. I think it has been a wonderful night's entertainment, and I think we have given people an hour and 40 odd minutes of wonderful history, wonderful music, wonderful verse, wonderful people, and particularly to our young people. I always say, they stand tall, and what they can do is just unbelievable. And as yourself, you're the president of TAP, and I commend you on that. So, Una, on behalf of Destination Newry, I would like to thank you. I think it has been a wonderful show, and we'll have to do this all over again very, very soon.
That's great. Bye.
So
here we are on the Carnally Massrock, on the farm where Séamus Moore grew up. The stones in front of me here were not part of the original Massrock, nor was the cross behind me. They actually came from Glasdamon Old Church when it was demolished. But the rock in front is original, and you can see a cross carved out in the rock. There's no doubt it was the Massrock. In fact, the little field up above us here was always known as a gallery for obvious reasons. There's a high rock back behind us that was known as Carrigan Rowark, or the rock with the view. And it was obviously on top of that hill that the sentries were posted to watch for the coming of the British soldiers when the priest was saying Mass. So it was in these fields and this secluded spot that Séamus Moore would have run about when he was a young lad, maybe even served Mass on this Massrock. And it was this Massrock he mentioned in the ballad that he wrote on the nights before he was hanged in Armagh jail. So picture Séamus Moore as he sat in his jailhouse waiting his death as he wrote these words. Grey comes the dawn, and from its misty heights comes light to me, who dawn no more will see. For in a few short hours, when sun rays bright flood o'er Armagh, dark death will come to me. The hangman's noose will tighten round my neck, and Patsy for blood money stretch out his hand. And when spring flowers the woods and dells bedeck, Séamus Murphy passes from the land. This is the end, O God, what bitter end! Might not now I, if free, roam hills, a poet's mantle don, and o'er a rhyme with Padder have a row. In dear Dunravy woods, the bracken fronds, uncoiled from earth their upward growth to make. The primrose pale is freed from winter's bonds, as trees are mirrored in Glasdamon Lake. In wild Carnally of the patchfield corn, there stands a Massrock. Would that I'd knelt in humble prayer, that August Lord's Day morn, and for my many sins repentance felt. But instead, I, pig-like, lay in drunken snore, my senses drugged by Patsy's raw poteen. Black Johnson dared lay hands on Séamus Moore, and drag him prisoner from that cursed shebeen. Poor Molly, sullen-browed and wry of soul, your sated spite gives yield to sorrow spare. Poor are your wages in a traitor's role, ease with my pardon the remorse you bear. Desires I'd named to my heart most dear, by Cregan Church I'd sleep death's silent sleep, and through my dreams the singing waters hear, and from the earth the raindrops softly seep. But as I helpless face the mob's wild stare, I hear the long-drawn cry of mourning arise. O Kate MacDonald with the golden hair, if you'd be there with sadness in your eyes. Around our fires, but men long will talk of me. I'll hear my tale retold in mournful rhyme. My pride, my fall, my folly, long sung shall be.